It was a tense evening in the TV studio. Millions across Africa and the world were watching live. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, calm but fierce, sat opposite Nigeria's powerful president, Bola Tinubu. The air crackled with electricity. No one expected what would happen next. The host asked a simple question about regional politics, but Traoré's eyes flashed with determination. He wasn't there to play safe. The camera zoomed in as he leaned forward, voice steady but sharp. "Mr. Tinubu," he said, "your country is burning, your people are suffering. Yet you point fingers at others. That's not leadership. That is fraud." The studio went silent. Tinubu's face tightened. The viewers felt it. Something was breaking. This was not a normal debate. Traoré's words were like a storm, the power of truth crashing down on a fragile facade. For many, it was the first time hearing such raw honesty from a leader. People watching felt their hearts tighten. Was this the moment Africa's leaders stopped pretending? As Traoré spoke, his voice grew softer but no less powerful. "Look at the streets of Lagos, the cries of mothers who cannot feed their children. Look at the youth with no hope. This is the reality your government hides behind slogans." Tinubu opened his mouth to respond, but Traoré didn't wait. "Fix your house first. Stop blaming others for your failures. Africa is tired of empty words and broken promises." The crowd in the studio shifted. Some gasped. Others nodded. On social media, hashtags exploded. Fraud or truth, Traoré's Tinubu. But what moved people most was the pain behind Traoré's words. The deep sadness of a man who knew his own country's struggles but refused to look away from others' suffering. Viewers felt tears prick their eyes. This was not just politics. It was a cry for justice, for honesty, for a better tomorrow. As the interview continued, Tinubu's usual calm cracked. His words grew sharp, defensive. But Traoré stayed steady, his eyes never leaving Tinubu's. "You call yourself a leader," Traoré said, voice rising slightly. "But you are a national fraud hiding behind wealth and power. Your silence has cost lives. The world is watching, and Africa is watching." The studio was electric. The camera caught every flicker of Tinubu's expression: anger, disbelief, shame. Millions watching at home felt their emotions swell. Some clenched their fists, others whispered prayers. Social media exploded with clips from the interview. The video went viral in minutes. News outlets ran breaking stories. The whole continent was talking about this moment. People were crying, not because of anger, but because for the first time, someone dared to speak the painful truth out loud on live TV. This was only the beginning. The studio lights blazed, but the atmosphere felt heavier than ever. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's voice echoed across millions of screens, cutting through years of silence. He wasn't just speaking to Bola Tinubu, he was speaking to every person suffering in the shadows. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged worried looks. This was no ordinary interview anymore. This was a reckoning. Traoré's words pierced through the noise. "You talk about progress, but families in both our countries still wake up hungry. Children go to bed without medicine. How many more must suffer before you act?" Tinubu's usual composure faltered. He glanced away briefly, then back, his expression unreadable. The tension between them was raw, like a volcano about to erupt. Viewers at home could feel it, their hearts pounding with every sentence. People shared their own stories online, of struggle, loss, hope. The interview wasn't just news. It was a mirror reflecting Africa's pain and dreams. Traoré wasn't just a leader. He was a voice for the voiceless, standing strong even when it meant facing a powerful opponent. Outside the studio, the city streets buzzed with whispers of what was unfolding live. In humble homes and crowded markets, people stopped their routines to watch Traoré's courage. His calm defiance touched something deep inside millions. He wasn't angry for anger's sake. He was angry because he cared, because he believed Africa deserved better. A young mother in Ouagadougou wiped tears from her eyes as Traoré spoke about hope, justice, and responsibility. A student in Lagos clenched his fists, inspired to dream bigger. Meanwhile, Tinubu struggled to respond. His words seemed rehearsed, lacking the passion pouring from Traoré's heart. The debate wasn't just political, it was personal, and as the clock ticked, the world watched a moment that felt like a turning point. Social media exploded with support for Traoré. Comments poured in. Finally, someone who speaks for us. He's our true leader. Africa needs more voices like his. But beneath the applause, a question lingered. Could one man's truth really change a continent's destiny? The host tried to steer the conversation back to diplomacy, but Traoré wasn't done. His eyes burned with unwavering conviction. "You want to talk diplomacy?" he said quietly, but with steel beneath his words. "Start by fixing the broken systems at home. Stop blaming others for what you have failed to fix." Tinubu's face darkened, his voice sharp but strained. "Leadership is not easy. You don't understand the complexities." Traoré's reply was a whisper that thundered across the studio. "I understand the pain of families, the fear of children in the night. That is leadership. Courage to face truth, even when it hurts." For a heartbeat, silence swallowed the room. Then suddenly the studio erupted, not with noise, but with the weight of reality. Viewers sat frozen. This was no longer just a debate. This was a call to awaken Africa's leaders and its people. The world waited, breathless, and Traoré's message was clear. The time for truth had come. After Traoré's powerful words, the studio fell into an uneasy silence. Even the host seemed unsure how to proceed. Cameras panned across faces frozen in shock and disbelief. Tinubu's usual confidence was shaken. His eyes darted away, searching for answers, but found none. For once, he was the one on the defensive. Outside, millions of viewers held their breath. Social media was exploding, but something deeper was happening inside hearts. Traoré's voice had cut through decades of political spin, leaving raw truth exposed. People were beginning to see their leaders, not as untouchable giants, but as human beings, flawed and accountable. A young boy in Lagos watched quietly, clutching his mother's hand. "Why can't leaders be honest?" he whispered. The question hung in the air, heavy and painful. And Traoré, unwavering, was not just a leader anymore. He was a symbol of hope, a promise that change was possible if people dared to speak truth. The world was watching. The moment felt fragile yet electric. Tinubu finally broke the silence, his voice low but firm. "Captain Traoré, your words are harsh, but Africa's problems are complex. You speak of truth, but leadership demands patience." Traoré nodded slowly, respect in his eyes, but did not relent. Patience without action is suffering. The people want change, not excuses. Fix your country's wounds before pointing fingers. The exchange grew heated, but Traoré's tone remained calm, his strength coming not from anger, but from conviction. Across Africa, viewers felt the weight of the debate. It was not just between two men. It was a battle for the continent's future. Some criticized Traoré's boldness, others cheered it, but most were moved to tears, feeling the pain and hope that fueled his every word. In living rooms and cafes, strangers whispered, "This is the voice we need. This is our fight." The interview was no longer just television. It was a movement. Suddenly, Traoré leaned forward, voice steady but filled with fire. "Mr. Tinubu, Africa watches not just leaders, but their actions. When will you stop being a national fraud and start being a servant to your people?" The words landed like thunder. The studio erupted. Some applauded quietly, Others gasped. On social media, the clip exploded. Millions replayed it. Hashtags trended worldwide. News channels ran with the story. People wept, not from anger alone, but from hope rekindled. The courage to speak such a truth on live TV had shaken old powers and sparked new conversations. The interview was more than a debate. It was a turning point. And as the world watched, one thing became clear. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had become a voice too loud to ignore. The interview had reached a boiling point, but Traoré's voice softened, revealing the weight he carried. Not just as a politician, but as a man who felt Africa's pain deeply. Leadership is not about power or money, he said quietly. It's about carrying the hopes of millions who wake up every day with little to hold on to. Tinubu's eyes flickered with something unexpected, a trace of understanding or maybe regret. The camera caught a fleeting moment behind the mask of politics. For too long, our people have suffered in silence, Traoré continued, and I carry that burden with every step I take, but silence is no longer an option. The studio was silent. Even Tinubu seemed to listen. Outside, families who watched this moment felt a fragile hope stir within them. A mother in Accra held her child close, tears streaming down her face, whispering prayers for change. This was more than a debate. It was a human story, of pain, hope, and the heavy cost of leadership. The host pressed on, sensing the emotional shift. Captain Traoré, some say your words are too harsh, too bold. What do you say to critics? Traoré looked directly into the camera, eyes fierce but sincere. Truth is never easy, but it is the only path to healing. He paused. We cannot build a future on lies or excuses. Tinubu shifted in his seat, the fire in his eyes dimming. Across Africa, viewers felt the raw power of those words. They weren't just watching a TV show, they were witnessing courage, honesty, and leadership stripped to its core. People shared stories of their own struggles, inspired by Traoré's bravery. A young man in Nairobi typed, "Finally, someone who speaks for us." The interview wasn't just a moment, it was a movement growing stronger with every heartbeat. As the cameras rolled, Traoré's voice grew even softer, filled with heartfelt urgency. Africa's heartbeat is in its people, he said. Their dreams, their pain, their strength. He looked toward Tinubu, not with anger, but with a call for unity. We must stop tearing each other down. We must build each other up. The tension in the room eased, replaced by a fragile hope. Tinubu's face softened slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the truth spoken. For the millions watching, it was a moment of reflection. On leadership, responsibility, and the future they all shared. Tears welled in many eyes, not from anger, but from the realization that change begins with truth and courage. And Captain Ibrahim Traoré had just reminded a continent of that. The tension in the studio was thick, but for a moment both leaders paused. Traoré's gaze softened as he looked beyond the cameras, not just at Tinubu, but at every viewer watching at home. He remembered the faces of children he had met, the mothers crying in silent desperation, the elderly who waited too long for help. Their pain was real, and it was urgent. Tinubu's expression was guarded, but there was a flicker of thoughtfulness in his eyes. The host broke the silence, asking about solutions. Traoré's answer came with quiet strength. Solutions come from facing truth, no matter how painful. Millions watching felt the weight of those words. The anger and frustration were there, but so was a flicker of hope. This was not just a clash of leaders. It was a moment of awakening for a continent tired of broken promises. Traoré leaned forward, voice steady but fierce. President Tinubu, every day your people live with power outages, with roads that swallow their hopes, with schools that fail their children. Before you judge others, look inside your own walls. The words hit hard. The studio audience held their breath. Tinubu's reply was cautious. Change is hard. It takes time. Traoré shook his head gently. Time is a luxury many cannot afford. Your people need action, now. Viewers across Africa felt the raw urgency. This was no longer politics. It was a plea for survival, for dignity. Many wept quietly, knowing these were truths long ignored. Traoré was not attacking for the sake of argument. He was fighting for the future of millions. The debate became a battlefield of truth versus denial. Tinubu's voice rose, defensive but weary. You speak with fire, but fire can burn the very home you want to protect. Traoré's eyes burned brighter. Sometimes the fire is needed to cleanse the rot. We cannot rebuild on lies. The studio felt like it could burst with the weight of unspoken stories. The hunger, the loss, the dreams crushed beneath the weight of corruption and neglect. Across homes and streets, people cried, tears of pain, but also tears of relief. For the first time, someone dared to speak their reality on a stage where no one could silence them. And that moment changed everything. Outside the bright studio lights, the reality of the people weighed heavily. In the bustling streets of Lagos and Ouagadougou, everyday citizens watched the heated debate unfold on small screens. A street vendor wiped sweat from his brow, eyes glued to the TV as Traoré's words echoed loud and clear. A mother in a crowded market held her crying child, feeling the weight of promises unkept. The pain was real and raw. Families struggling with power outages, lack of clean water, and rising prices. Yet here was Traoré, daring to voice their pain where many had stayed silent. For many, his words were a mirror reflecting their harsh reality. Tears streamed silently as hope battled despair. Could this fiery debate spark the change they desperately needed? The contrast between the polished studio and these struggling streets was stark, but the heartbeat was the same. Traoré was not just a leader in a room, he was a voice in every corner of the continent, carrying the hopes of millions on his shoulders. Back in the studio, the tension grew. Tinubu's defenses faltered under Traoré's relentless truth. You speak as if you carry Africa's future alone, Tinubu said, frustration seeping through his words. Change is complicated. We face challenges that cannot be solved overnight. Traoré's gaze did not waver. Change begins with courage, he replied, with one voice daring to speak the truth, even when it scares others. Millions watching felt a spark ignite inside them. A student in Nairobi whispered to his friends, "This is the leader we need." A grandmother in Accra clutched her rosary, tears falling as she prayed for healing. It was clear. One voice, bold and unyielding, was shaking the foundations of power, and the world was listening. The debate reached its crescendo. Traoré's voice rang out strong, filled with unshakable conviction. You call me a fool for speaking truth, he said, eyes locked with Tinubu's, but I stand for those who have no voice, for mothers who cry themselves to sleep, for children who dream of a better day. The studio fell silent, the weight of his words sinking deep. Tinubu's lips pressed tight, but even he could not deny the power in those words. Across Africa, people wiped tears from their eyes, feeling a profound mix of sorrow and hope. This was more than politics. It was humanity demanding justice. And Captain Ibrahim Traoré had just shown the world the courage it takes to face it. As the debate raged on, millions across Africa watched with aching hearts. In small villages and big cities alike, families gathered around flickering TVs and dusty phones to witness history unfolding. A grandmother in a dusty Malian village clutched a faded photo of her children, her eyes welling with tears. She heard Traoré's words as if he spoke directly to her pain and resilience. A young father in Lagos sat silently, his hands trembling. His wife and children depended on him. but he felt powerless against the broken system. Traoré was no longer just a leader on a screen. He was their voice, their hope, their mirror. His fierce words held the weight of thousands of untold stories, hunger, fear, and dreams deferred. In every tear shed and fist clenched, his message echoed loud and clear. Change was not just needed, it was demanded. Back in the studio, the atmosphere grew electric. Tinubu's usual poise faltered as Traoré's unyielding truth shattered the scripted narrative. "You call me a fraud," Tinubu snapped, "but look at your own failures." Traoré leaned forward, voice calm but piercing. "Failures?" he asked softly. "I stand with those who suffer daily. The true failure is to ignore them." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Viewers felt the weight of the confrontation, not just between two men, but between accountability and denial. The moment was raw, real, and unforgettable. Social media exploded with clips, reactions, and debates. Millions shared the moment, feeling both heartbreak and hope. For many, this was a defining moment for Africa's future. Traoré's eyes burned with unwavering resolve. "This continent has faced hardship before," he said. "We've survived storms, wars, and heartbreak. But what defines us is our heart, our refusal to give up." He looked directly into the camera, speaking not just to leaders, but to every person watching. "To every mother, father, and child, your pain is seen. Your dreams are valid. We will fight together." Tears streamed from viewers' eyes, their emotions raw and open. For the first time in a long time, hope felt real. Traoré's courage had pierced through despair, awakening a continent's spirit. The story was far from over. But one thing was certain: change had begun. The studio was silent. Traoré's words had struck a nerve deeper than anyone expected. He looked not just at Tinubu, but into the eyes of millions who watched. "Africa is tired of empty promises," Traoré said, voice trembling with emotion. "But I refuse to let despair win." He shared a story of a young girl he met who walked miles for clean water. Her dream simple, yet her reality harsh. "That girl's hope is the heartbeat of this continent," he said softly. "We owe her a future worth dreaming about." Across the continent, eyes filled with tears. Mothers, fathers, children, all felt the weight of that hope. Traoré wasn't just fighting for politics, he was fighting for humanity. And in that moment, he became a beacon in the dark. Tinubu's face hardened, but Traoré's resolve only grew stronger. "You say I'm harsh," Traoré replied. "But truth is the only medicine for a sick nation." The studio lights burned bright, capturing every raw emotion. "Fix your own home before casting stones. The people deserve leaders who listen, who act, who care." The words echoed far beyond the studio walls. Millions took to social media, sharing clips, crying, debating, and hoping. The world was watching. This was no longer just a debate, but a call for change. Traoré's voice rang out loud and clear. Africa's future was in the hands of its leaders and its people. As the interview ended, Traoré looked directly into the camera. "This is not the end, but the beginning," he said. "Together, we will rise from these struggles. Together, we will build a continent we can all be proud of." Tears flowed freely across faces watching at home, hearts stirred by courage, truth, and hope. And now, dear viewer, this story is ours to continue. If this moved you, if you believe in truth and courage, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Tell us your story, share your hopes, join the movement, because change begins with us, all of us. Let's rise together.